The email arrived at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and I read it 3 times before I understood what I was looking at. It was an offer letter. My offer letter. My signature, generated by my own hiring system, sent to a name I knew better than my own. Ryan Callahan, Senior Account Strategist. Starting Monday. I sat there in my kitchen, phone glowing in the dark, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because 40 minutes earlier I had opened his phone while he was in the shower and found a photo he never meant for me to see. A woman's hand on his chest. A caption that said, "Can't wait for you to move here." 2 discoveries 40 minutes apart, and only one person in that apartment knew they were connected. He thought he was starting a new job at a growing agency downtown. He had no idea the woman who signed off on every hire, every budget, every fired employee was the same woman whose toothbrush was sitting in his bathroom. He didn't know my name on paper. He never had a reason to ask. And by the time he found out, it would already be too late to take any of it back. 3 years earlier, I hadn't planned on becoming invisible in my own company. It happened gradually, the way most smart decisions do. When I started Halden Cole Media at 24, I brought on a business partner named Vanessa Cole, who is 10 years older, effortlessly charming, and exactly the face a young agency needed in rooms full of skeptical clients. I was the strategist behind the numbers, the one who actually built the client relationships that mattered and negotiated every contract that kept the lights on, but I hated being photographed, hated small talk at industry mixers, and honestly, I liked watching people underestimate me. So we made an agreement. Vanessa would be the public-facing CEO. I would hold 60% ownership through a holding company with a name that meant nothing to anyone, and I would run the agency from behind a title that said Director of Operations. Nobody outside our 5-person leadership team knew who actually controlled Halden Cole. That anonymity had made me rich, made me sharp, and made me very, very good at watching people reveal exactly who they were when they thought no one important was in the room. I met Ryan at a friend's rooftop birthday party 18 months ago. He worked in advertising sales for a rival firm. He was funny in the low-key way that sneaks up on you, and he had this habit of remembering small details from conversations weeks later that made me feel unusually seen. We moved in together after 9 months, which felt fast to everyone else and felt inevitable to me. I never told him what I did for a living beyond marketing, boring stuff, corporate side. He never pushed. I told myself that was normal, that plenty of couples don't dissect each other's jobs over dinner. Looking back, I think some part of me liked having one relationship in my life where I wasn't the owner of anything, where I could just be someone's girlfriend who forgot to buy milk. The cracks started small enough that I almost missed them. He started taking calls in the hallway. He'd angle his laptop screen away from me when I walked past the couch, not dramatically, just enough. He got a gym membership at a place 40 minutes from our apartment and started going at hours that didn't match anyone's normal schedule. I noticed all of it and said nothing, because noticing and confronting are 2 very different disciplines, and confronting without proof has never gotten anyone anything except gaslit. Then, 3 weeks ago, Vanessa forwarded me a resume with a note that just said, "This one's good. Thoughts?" The name on the resume was Ryan Callahan. My Ryan. Applying for a senior role at my company, a company he genuinely believed was run by a woman he'd never met named Vanessa Cole, at an agency I had built brick by brick, while he thought I filed spreadsheets somewhere downtown. I stared at his photo on that resume, the same easy smile I woke up next to every morning, and felt something in my chest go very cold and very still. I didn't say a word to him about the resume. Instead, I did what I do best. I watched and I waited, and I let the process play out exactly as it would have for any other candidate, because I needed to know something before I decided what to do with what I'd found. I needed to know if this was a coincidence, or if it was something worse. It didn't take long to get my answer. Halden Cole's biggest client that quarter was a beauty brand named Lumra, and their marketing director was a woman named Priya Shah, sharp, ambitious, married to her job in a way I respected. Priya had personally requested Ryan for the Lumra account after meeting him at an industry conference 2 months earlier. When I pulled the internal notes from that conference, I found a hotel booking under Priya's corporate card for a room with 2 names on the guest list. His and hers. The same week, he'd told me he was in Chicago visiting his brother. I sat with that information for 4 days before I opened his phone in the shower steam and found the photo that started the story. Her hand. His chest. Can't wait for you to move here. Priya wasn't just involved with a man I loved. She was actively engineering his career, pulling him toward her account, toward her city, toward a life she was already picturing without me in it. And the cruelest, most useful detail of all was that she had done it through my company, using my hiring pipeline, funneling her requests through Vanessa's inbox, completely unaware that the woman whose approval every hire needed was the girlfriend she was trying to replace. I could have confronted him that night. I could have thrown the phone at him and screamed everything I knew. Instead, I closed the bathroom door quietly, went back to my laptop, and approved his hire. Not out of forgiveness, out of strategy. Because a man who thinks he's gotten away with something behaves very differently than a man who's been caught, and I needed him to keep behaving exactly the way he had been, honest with everyone except me, for just a little longer. The next 2 weeks were the hardest performance of my life. I kissed him goodbye, every morning knowing where his mind was drifting. I asked about his new job with genuine-sounding excitement while I sat in on his final interview from behind a one-way glass panel he never knew existed, watching him charm Vanessa with the same warmth he used on me every night. I read every message Priya sent him, not because I enjoyed the pain, but because each one told me something new about the timeline they were planning, about the account budget she intended to inflate to justify moving him onto her team permanently, about a transfer request already drafted that would relocate the Lumra account, and Ryan with it, to a satellite office in another state within 90 days. This wasn't a fling anymore. It was a plan, built entirely on the assumption that no one who mattered was paying attention. They were wrong about exactly one thing, and it was the only thing that mattered. His first day at Halden Cole, I made sure I wasn't in the building. I wanted him settled, comfortable, confident before I introduced the one variable he hadn't accounted for. I let 3 weeks pass. I let him get his security badge, his desk, his first small win on the Lumra account, his first real taste of believing he'd landed exactly where he wanted to be. I let Priya's transfer paperwork move quietly through the system, gaining the kind of momentum that's very hard to undo once too many people have signed off on it. And then, on a Thursday afternoon, I walked into the all-hands quarterly meeting the way I always did, early, unassuming, sitting near the back where Director of Operations was expected to sit. Except this time Vanessa didn't open with client numbers. She opened by announcing a restructuring, a merger of our majority ownership into a public operating name, and she introduced, for the first time in Halden Cole's history, the actual controlling owner of the company to the entire staff. Me. I watched his face longer than I probably should have. Confusion first, the kind that comes from a piece of information that simply doesn't fit anywhere in your existing picture of the world. Then recognition, arriving like a wave hitting a second late. Then the color leaving his face as 30 coworkers turned to see who I was looking at because I hadn't been subtle about where my eyes had landed. He understood in that moment that the woman who'd been living with him, cooking with him, loving him, was also the woman whose signature was on his offer letter, whose approval had greenlit his entire account, whose company his affair had been quietly threatening to hollow out from the inside. I didn't scream at him in that meeting. I didn't need to. I finished the announcement, thanked the room, and asked Ryan and Priya, calmly, to stay behind for what I described only as a compliance conversation, because as it turned out, I had spent those 3 weeks doing more than watching. I had pulled every expense report tied to the Lumra relocation plan and found that Priya had been quietly padding the account's travel budget to cover hotel stays that had nothing to do with client work, a violation serious enough to trigger an internal review under her own company's vendor conduct policy. A policy I had access to because Lumra's compliance officer happened to be an old business school classmate of mine who owed me a favor and a phone call. I laid it out for both of them in a closed conference room, plainly, without raising my voice, the exact way I'd built every hard conversation of my professional life. Priya's employer terminated the Lumra account relationship within the month once the misused funds came to light, which meant there was no relocated position, no satellite office, no future for either of them to move toward together. And Ryan, whose employment at Halden Cole I was under no legal obligation to end, resigned on his own 2 days later, unable to sit in a building that would forever remind him of the version of himself he'd tried to become behind my back. I moved out of our apartment that same week, into a place with better light and no memory of him in it. I didn't need to destroy him to feel like justice had happened. I only needed him to understand, fully and permanently, that the woman he thought he could deceive quietly had simply chosen, for a little while, to let him think he was getting away with it. Some people learn that lesson through anger. He learned it the way I've always preferred to teach, through patience, through evidence, and through the particular kind of silence that only makes sense once every piece finally falls into place. I still think about that email sometimes, the one that started it all, sitting there glowing in my dark kitchen. I don't feel triumphant when I remember it anymore. I just feel calm, the way you feel after finally setting down something heavy you'd been carrying without even realizing how much it weighed.